Twinfold is a game of roguelike addition at battle against square foes as you double up numbers. It's a mixture of multiple game styles, drawing from Threes, the roguelike works of Michael Brown, and the clarity of information from Into the Breach. This mixture makes a compelling playstyle that draws players into its labyrinth of number merging, mean-spirited cubes. Gamasutra spoke with Clay Sun, developer of Twinfold, to learn more about mingling several ideas to make a unique title, the importance of procedural generation to making Twinfold an appealing experience, and how testing and bouncing ideas off a friend can help make a game come together. I think I came up with the idea after playing Into the Breach, and I stole a bunch of mechanics from Threes and Michael Brown's roguelikes. I liked how Into the Breach provided perfect information to the player, turning what looked like a strategy game into kind of a puzzle game. So, I wrote Into the Breach-style dungeon crawler into my notebook, and then I made Twinfold. I do not remember how the idea got kicked off. There is not usually a story behind how I come up with ideas is not really an important part of the process for me. I took the number merging and board movement mechanics from Threes, and the objective and the wall shifting mechanics from Embroglio. I figured the fact that both games are played on small grids meant that those mechanics would mesh well. At first, combat was similar to Embroglio, a single pause, where if you were next to an enemy and slid towards them, you would only attack them instead of sliding the whole board. This felt unintuitive and did not really fit with the main mechanic. Then, my roommate Gabe came up with the idea that sliding enemies into walls would hurt them, and the whole thing clicked. Thanks, Gabe. I did not really think about the design as a simplification of those kinds of games. It was more of a matter of tying ideas together by overlaying more mechanics. A lot of the simplification work came from the games as though from the complexity came naturally out of the main mechanic. Once I had the basic building blocks in, the complicated puzzle solving was already there. My first sketch of the game was already pretty close to the final product. I think the addition of the wall splashing mechanic was the only major discovery. There were plenty of minor iterations on the design, though, at first, the numbers only added 1 to their value whenever they merged, which felt unsatisfying. You used to only be able to undo moves that caused a game over. The enemies used to not get hurt when they ran into walls. At one point, there was no cap to how much mana you could hold, which encouraged the farming and felt grindy. The enemies used to spawn more frequently, to a point where you were constantly only thinking about how to deal with them without having a chance to merge. The danger meter used to be invisible to the player. Most of those changes came from playtester feedback. Usually gates. Most of them were created to counter a single gameplay mechanic. Gray enemies do not move. Blue enemies are not affected by walls. Purple enemies do not fall into pits. Red enemies do not get hurt when squashed against walls. Each of those enemy types requires the player to use a slightly different strategy to deal with them. My roommate Gabe came up with the green enemies that only go for the gold, and the evil twin enemies that move the whole board. Those two enemy types appear less often, and are there to switch things up every once in a while. To be honest, the skills were the part of the game that I put the least amount of thought into. I knew I had to make a lot, so I just added whatever came to mind as long as they made sense with the game's mechanics and were easy to implement. I never considered designing stages for this game, so it was not really a conscious decision. I feel like procedural generation is a fundamental part of the experience, and the game would not make sense without it. I had to do a lot of work to make sure the generated layouts did not seem unfair. The biggest challenge I faced, which I did not actually end up solving, was figuring out how to keep solutions within a reasonable difficulty range. Between each wall setup, the variance in steps required to pull off a merge can be very high. To fix this, it would be required a special pathfinding algorithm that I did not feel like implementing. It probably would be a better game if I did spend the time to do it, but I do not think it would be done better enough to warrant the effort. Yes, I did never envision it as anything other than a mobile game, so it's hard to see how design decisions were affected by the platform. The fact that most of its major influences were also mobile games probably had a big effect on things. I wanted to make sure it was easy to pick up and put down, so it loads you immediately into the game without making you look at a title screen if you are in the middle of a playthrough. I also wanted to make sure the game could be played with one hand. That did not really require any extra work, though. Max Games, acclaimed platformer Celeste, has sold over 500,000 copies since launching back in January. Game director and designer Matt Dawson broke the news on Twitter and promised to update Celeste with some new farewell levels in 2019. First-month programmer Noel Berry initially created a prototype of Celeste for the Pico 8 virtual game console during a 5-day game jam. That version of the game has since been dubbed Celeste Classic and contained 30 challenging levels designed to test the skills of platforming aficionados and speedrunners. Eventually, Dawson and Berry decided to turn their prototype into a full-fledged release and brought the finished product to the Nintendo Switch, X1, PlayStation 4, Windows, Linux, and macOS earlier this year. Gunfire Games, developer behind Dark City, put out a patch yesterday which allows players to switch to a new, classic, combat mode. A few games have introduced similar modes, although it seems THADDAKSIDERSIICLASSIC combat mode implements mechanics that make it play similarly to previous titles in the franchise. As explained in its patch notes, players will see two different options when starting the game: loading a save file. A prompt for either default or classic will pop up, where the latter should feel more like previous Darksiders titles, allowing Fury to dodge interrupt her attacks, as well use items instantly. The default mode is the original combat mode for Darksiders 3rd, and the option can be changed at any point in gameplay options while playing. This has no other effects on difficulties or achievements. To read the entire patch notes, which includes other performance fixes, click here. Unity has blocked the use of real-time multiplayer platforms patches, leaving many developers who rely on the service in a state of limbo. A change to the Unity terms of service means all existing Spatlos titles, including production games and those still in development, are now in breach of the company's license terms. Spatlos creator Improbable broke the news in a blog post and explained Unity has also revoked its ability to continue working with the engine for breaching the newly changed terms of service in an unspecified way. That means the company will no longer be able to fully support Unity developers, as to many of whom have been forced to shut down the servers of their Spatlos projects. Although Improbable believes the unfortunate and counterproductive action to be a simple error in judgment, a coordination failure on Unity's part, the company is worried by the fact the change occurred during an open commercial negotiation with the engine maker. Overnight, this is an action by Unity that has immediately done harm to projects across the industry, including those of extremely vulnerable and small-scale developers, and damaged major projects in development over many years. Wrote improbable. Games that have been funded based on the promise of Spatelos to deliver next-generation multiplayer are now endangered due to their choice of game engine. Live games are now in legal limbo. All customers who entered into a relationship with Ascend Unity previously did so on the good faith understanding that the terms they signed up to, sometimes years ago, would allow them to be successful and not carry additional charges. Improbable is now urgently seeking a solution to the situation, and says it will do everything in its power to solve the issue in good faith with Unity, with the ideal outcome being a reversal of the terms change. In the meantime, the company has pledged to help developers using Spatelos with Unity finish, release, and operate their games, and is setting up an emergency fund for partners who are now thrown into the financial mire. Improbable will also be fully open sourcing the Spatelos game development kit for Unity under the MIT license, in the hope it might assist individual customers in some way. Those interested can find out more about the dispute over on the Improbable blog. Former Udon Systems developers say their sudden firings were the result of retaliation over ongoing labor disputes.